Čaute, jelikož včera byla super debata, kterou doporučuji se podívat i na DuelClashi, prostě antiplochozemci, zase se nám předvedli jak nejlépe mohli, takže doporučuji, mrkněte se na to. No a každopádně, přišlo tam jako obvykle téma na Shaneův model, Shane Flat Earth Doom Model. A prosím vás, za chvilku tam budete mít ode mě e-mail, vysvětlíme si všechno, tady tohle to bude hezká prezentace od Shanea ohledně té nebeské sféry, ohledně té naší osobní nebeské sféry, o které my mluvíme, jinak řečeno, azimutální mřížka zraku. Takže dneska si ten pojem, nebo respektive to, co tím myslíme, tak si vysvětlí vám to samotný expert na tuto tematiku, tedy Shane. No ale dále v popisku, tak budete mít e-mail, kde můžete Shanea oslovit s tímto modelem a já se vsadím, že jste to ještě doteď nikdo neudělali. Takže máte tu příležitost, můžete odepsat Shaneovi do toho e-mailu. A nebo případně můžete se zastavit na náš Discord a můžeme se o tom popovídat. My se té debatě s vámi nebráníme. A pokud jste antiplochozemci, tak samozřejmě úplně nejradši, tak tu debatu budeme mít na kameře, že jo. Takže pojďme směle do toho, jo a samozřejmě nezapomeňte si utřít ty vaše globerský slzy, kucí. No a jak jsem v té debatě zmiňoval, tak všichni ty antiflervci tak nejsou schopni si otevřít ani jeho Twitter. Ani jeho Twitterový účet, kde to je hnedka připnutý jako první příspěvek. A zde máte naprosto všechno ohledně toho modelu. Shane se vám dokonce omlouvá, že je to docela dlouhý text, takže já to za chvilku zrychlím, protože prostě full description below, it's long story, full model. Takže teď to za chvilku zrychlíme, protože nemá to cenu to takhle projíždět celý, ale každý z vás si může ten Twitterový kanál otevřít a každý z vás si může tyhle informace ověřit. Každý z vás tak má možnost toho Shanea kontaktovat, protože přímo tady tady Shane ST Proton Mail. No a teďka už skočíme na krátký úryvek z prezentace od Shanea, která probíhala včera. Je to prezentace na naši nebeskou sféru a na gratikuli a jak to spolu souvisí a jak to funguje. Tedy proč nemáme vlastně žádnou flerfí mapu a proč nikdy nikdo nezmapoval ve skutečnosti naší Zem tak, že by reálně měřil tu Zem, ale vždycky jsme měřili hvězdy. Takže doporučuji se na to mrknout. Celá prezentace tak ji najdete na Shaneovém YouTubeovém kanále, nebo na Alanovém, anebo na Aether Cosmology YouTubeovém kanále. Stejně tak to najdete na našem Discordovém kanále. No a směle do toho.
That scene, I remember it, just as I remember it. Yep. So, let's start with the sun. The sun and the ecliptic. When we talk about the celestial sphere, it's really a made-up concept that we think it's convenient for us that we put in place based on our flat level plane and the observation of the sun making an arc, right, rising and setting. This is all the evidence for the globe that there ever was, and today we're gonna dive into that. So first, let's take a look at what the ecliptic is for flat Earth, because Globers actually hurl the ecliptic at me as if it's an insult, right? As if it's an attack, and it's like, whoa, well, no. Obviously, that was backwards engineered off real observations, and in no way is exclusive for your model, but let's take a look.
So when we talk about the ecliptic, right, we talk about the sun's apparent migration from tropic to tropic and what it looks like to us. Now, what causes this is if you look at the flat Earth dome model here, right, you can see that the sun is on a slight tilt above the plane, right? It's not perfectly level on the slight tilt. It's about a 5-degree inclination. Now the moon is on a similar inclination but not the same, and the difference in those inclinations between eclipse cycles is what makes them miss most times when they intersect and not actually connect for a so-called eclipse, right? So those two things are definitely present. The one from the sun, though, is what creates what we know as the ecliptic, right? So the sun's band is what we're looking at in each observer. So from here, you can see the sun travels from about here to about here. That's the 23.5 degrees that we're talking about in the ecliptic. If we get a different angle on it, we can see the analemma begin to form in the person's perspective, right? Because each person would see that in a different position here. So that's where the sun is, and that's where the sun appears to be. So the migration of the sun annually is what we're calling the ecliptic. So this band, you see this band right here, the sun travels from this band depending on the time of the year, south of east rather, and set south of west. So it's rise south of east, set south of west. There we go. And again, depending on the season, it does the opposite. Rise north of east, set south of west. Okay, now that ecliptic band in each observer is what is making this possible. Again, right? This is the band. And this is again caused by the true path of the sun doing this. Right? As its migration, it goes up and down, it changes height, and it gets a little bit lower depending on the season, right? So if we looked at it from the top, you would be able to tell it just goes out and in, and out and in. And that's what we see on most of our simulations and most of our depictions when we're talking about it. This is what it shows you. But what it's actually doing in 3D is changing heights, right? That's all it's doing. That's what creates more and less light. If you look at it down, you can see that as it gets lower and out to the corner, it creates more and less light. But that's the ecliptic in a nutshell.
Not a mutually exclusive proof of the globe, then?
Dude, I forgot that I had no push to talk. Hold on, let me fix this. Voice activity. There we go. Yeah, I can't do push to talk while presenting. Somebody remind me to change this later, or I will definitely hot mic through some stuff. So all the globe evidence there ever was is the ecliptic, right? The sun. We start with the sun, the daytime celestial sphere, but it is in no way different during the night. It's just this hemisphere that you view, and the celestial objects' path make arcs as they rise and set, as they would if you observe the world in a hemisphere or a half dome, right? Over here is the corresponding position of on the globe Earth where it would have to be, right, for this to make sense. And that's crazy, of course. This is crazy. This is how it gets misinterpreted to be this, though. And from this, we get this. But everything is based on flat Earth, right? You can't have any elevation angles off an infinite tangent to a curve, whatever. But when we get into it, when we talk about the celestial sphere, we should probably try to define it. So when we define it, we should probably start with what they say it is, right? So we'll go to our good old Wikipedia. And when they say it, it's just an abstract sphere that has an arbitrarily large radius that is concentric to Earth. So they're very specifically saying, oh, it may be centered on the observer. Oh, okay. And all objects in the sky can be conceived as being projected upon the inner surface of the celestial sphere. Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting how it says that it can be thought of, right? It can be treated as, you can do calculations based on it isn't, but you can treat it in all practical world as if it is. That's interesting. Also, something about the distance here. It would seem, it needs to be in the distance. Let's go to a more accurate definition, right? We can say it's an abstract concept characterized by the arbitrarily large radius, which is, for practical purposes, infinite. It's an infinite radius. You can't have arbitrarily large. That is in no way different than infinite. So when you have an infinite radius, that's flat. You're using flat angles. It's the same thing. The celestial sphere is essentially pretending that the Earth isn't flat and that the sky is, right? So it's doing an inversion of that, but we'll get right to that. It says that, right, if you set the celestial sphere to an infinite radius, you make the sky the planar geometry and the ground spherical. But in reality, you actually measure angles to the sky, making it the sphere, and then you lay a square on the ground because of its planar aspect to reality. So it's completely inverted. But by projecting stars and celestial bodies onto this imaginary sphere, they say they can simplify it. Oh, because then they get to treat them all as if they're the same distance, which in all practical uses, for every time they used to measure them and navigate by, they're all equidistant. So a sphere of infinite radius can be conceptualized as a flat plane. And if you work it out, right, in geometry, as the sphere increases indefinitely, the curvature decreases, and eventually, if you go that to infinity, the curvature becomes zero, meaning it's flat. So practically zero difference between a sphere of infinite radius and a flat surface. Just putting that out there. And again, the celestial sphere most basically is an abstract concept, so isn't a real thing. It's a made-up thing. And why do I depict it like this, right? I think maybe you guys have seen this image go around. I do depict it like this, but what is that based on? Let me turn chat off. There we go. So I do it like this because it's all coordinate systems, number lines, and nonsense. It's got no basis in reality. The celestial sphere is essentially...
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Yep. It's essentially spherical coordinates, basically, on top of spherical polar planar. When you're getting angles with geographic long lat, of course, you got the planar cone, which is doing minor circles of equal altitude all the way down. That's the purpose of the cone. And then you can't forget the geographic long lat, which is, of course, the grid lines, giving you the spherical axis. Of course, we get to our geographic long lat with angles. Now we have a point, and then this would be the celestial sphere. So that all those images are what I've been using as my celestial sphere, because I couldn't think of a better way to show it was made up of number lines and nonsense in space with no tie to reality, right? So it's all made up math. If we look at another depiction, nice flat plane with a celestial half dome on top. I think all of the depictions would agree, right? This one they call it the local celestial sphere. If you say that to a glober, they'll scoff. That's a made up thing that Shane made up. No, absolutely not, right? First of all, the atmospheric dome put out by Jaren way back when, right? So we've all just been building on that, and it's just a concept of you have a limit of vision, which is based on you don't see forever because light attenuates and there's an inverse square law and it falls off, and all of that makes sense, right? So the local celestial sphere is just something that they use to reference everything in the sky. Another contributor, our boy Levelist, I think hooked us up with this one from the Passive Solar Energy book. They call it the Sky Dome. That's interesting. Almost like same depiction, taking angles based on a flat baseline. Another depiction, the same thing. This is what they call the celestial sphere. They're using their quadrant to take measurements. Seems to be a pattern. When they get over here, of course, this is how they get infinite parallel light. But mutation, look at their explanation for the 23.4 degree tilt. Way more complicated than the sun going up and down and in and out, I would say. And if we just let's get to a brief pictorial representation, right, of what the celestial sphere is. Super easy. We can go through it, right? We start with you sitting out on your flat plane, viewing the stars in a hemispherical dome around you. This is how you would see them, right? This is how we observe them on both models. No matter if you live on the globe, we view them exactly the same, right? It's not a physical dome. It's just the limit of your vision. So when you can't see forever, which is, I think, evidence in the fact that nobody sees all of the sky, everyone only sees half of the sky, which is why this gives us the half of the radius over here, right? This is why I say that all the time. If we have the global perspective, they think that the street lights are setting, right? Just like the sun doesn't set. But if we use our celestial sphere to observe celestial objects, how do we do that? Oh, but then how do they move?
Tak tohle byl úryvek z Shaneovy prezentace. Jak si můžete všimnout, Shane tohleto má opravdu do detailu rozpracované a jak jste mohli vidět, máte tam e-mail, s kterým ho můžete všichni oslovit. Pokud by se vám náhodou neozval, jakože ty antifiers mu žádný e-mail neposlali, tak já moc rád mu napíšu, hele Shane, tohle je někdo od nás, byli bychom fakt rádi, kdyby si s ním o tom pobavil a on to pro vás a pro nás rád udělá. Takže není jediný problém. Ale samozřejmě jednodušší je psát hejtový zprávy za klávesnicí a pak se bát chodit za kameru, bát se jakoby oslovovat ty skutečný lidi a tak dále. To je takový jako vzorec, který vidíme opakovat se velmi často. No, každopádně, pokud vás něco tohle zaujalo, chtěli byste vědět více o naší alternativní kosmologii, více o tom, kde žijeme, no tak Aether Cosmology, to je prostě naprostý základ, takže Discord, Aether Cosmology, aethercosmology.com, to je samozřejmě naše blogová stránka. Dále veškeré moje sociální sítě, ať už YouTube, Instagram, Telegram, Facebook, TikTok, Plochý Podcast. Stejně tak facebooková skupina Plochá Země a dále taky můj osobní kanál Noglobe Domo na Instagramu. No a samozřejmě teďka nově YouTubeový kanál CosmologyCzSk, kde postupně budeme teďka přidávat ty veškeré materiály a hlavně budeme vám tam překládat všechny tyto zásadní prezentace, které jsou v angličtině, takže vám je tam budeme dodávat s titulkama. Takže jak všichni víme, tak žijeme na geocentrický, topograficky vyrovnaný pláni setrvačnosti, středu všeho bytí, no a tady ty antiplochozemci to nikdy nezastaví.